from the University of Pittsburgh, and I'm very impressed with this because I'm also a lawyer, but I don't have a PhD. And I would just want to emphasize that title, that honorific, is actually quite relevant for President Osmani's role in her country, both with her keen and long-standing focus on rule of law and on the overarching importance of institutions and rule of law, and second, because of the current political deadlock in the country over actually constituting parliament and then forming a new government from elections that were held in February. And there's been this deadlock, and President Osmani, in her role, of course, as president, and following an important ruling from Kosovo's constitutional court, has a crucial role now with the clock ticking on a 30-day deadline. So we're going to talk about that. And we're also going to talk about, of course, the overarching importance of Kosovo's relations with the United States, with the Trump administration, and, of course, President Osmani's role and her strong emphasis on cooperation and coordination with the United States and NATO and the European Union. And we'll get into those topics and others related here today. So thank you so much for being with us, President Osmani.
Thank you so much. It's a great pleasure to be back here.
Okay, great to have you back with us. And President Osmani, we're here in Washington. So how would you characterize your objectives on this visit? Your meetings with the Trump administration, you're seeing very senior Trump administration officials. And interestingly, and for those of you who may not follow it quite as closely, you're coming at a time when President Trump himself has repeatedly focused on the dynamics in the region and especially mentioning Serbia and Kosovo. So if you could give us some backdrop as to your visit and your objectives, please.
Well, thank you, Professor Joseph. In every single visit that we make to the United States, there's always the same objective, and that is how we can enhance and how we can widen the perspective of a better relationship between the United States and Kosovo, the country that I have the honor to represent. These relations are already historic, they're excellent, they're really deep. However, I strongly believe that there's always potential to bring them to new heights. And now with the new administration, with President Trump's administration, there are, of course, new ideas on how the new administration wants to further enhance these relations with countries, with allies around the world. And we want to sit down with partners in this administration to explain how Kosovo provides that potential that also, of course, is in the interest of our people, in the interest of our country, in the interest of our region. But at the same time, it fits with the priorities of the Trump administration in making America safer, stronger, and more prosperous. Now, I do know that Kosovo might be seen just as a small country somewhere in the Balkans, but I strongly believe that a country's potential, a country's impact, a country's importance should not be solely determined by its size or by its economy, but also by the story, by the resilience, and by the example that it has set in international relations. And Kosovo has set an excellent example of a country that had brought the world together in defense of the values of freedom and democracy. But at the same time, it represents a flawless American victory, a flawless victory in every sense. And I would add a bipartisan American victory, because it's one of the countries that has had the strongest support from both sides of the aisle. It started in the US Congress. It moved all the way to the White House at a time when the rest of the world was turning a blind eye on the suffering of the people of Kosovo. So the basis, the foundation of this relationship is extremely strong. But of course, just like with any other relationship, you need to continuously build on it. You need to continuously nurture it. And this is why these visits are important, because we sit down with friends, with partners. One, we present the potential of the Republic of Kosovo. Secondly, we talk about the importance of U.S. leadership in the world. Because just imagine, in the region that we come from, talking about the Western Balkans, and you've studied the Balkans for so long, to know a very simple but impactful fact. And that is, until America came, that region had never known peace in its history. Never. Go back decades, go back centuries, go back millennia. That region was always in wars until the United States stepped in and showed not just moral clarity, but also boldness in action that went well beyond the statements that we would hear for decades, despite of the fact that statements were not changing the oppression. Statements was not stopping the aggressor that was Milosevic at that time. It was the boldness and the action of the United States of America that brought peace to a region that had never known peace in its history. And that is an amazing impact in the world. So that leadership is necessary again, because obviously, as President Trump rightly pointed out a couple of times now already in these 2 or 3 weeks, there are constant destabilization efforts. And again, as President Trump pointed out, Serbia was going to, of course, continuously plans to commit acts of aggression and attack and so on and so forth. In the words of President Trump, Serbia was going to go at it. And of course, at it means Kosovo. There were, continuous developments in that sense, but we're stepping up efforts through our defense capabilities, security institutions, but at the same time, we have the continued support of the United States. And President Trump was very clear that he was the one who stopped Serbia, who was going to go at it. So it is clear that there are constant destabilization efforts from our northern neighbor, who unfortunately lives in the past and continues to look at its neighbors as temporary states. It's a typical Russian strategy. And, Serbia continues to play that role of a Russian proxy state and dancing on Putin's tune. So we need to work as close as possible with our partners in the United States and the European Union to prevent, to deter, because prevention and deterrence is key in this case in order to make sure that we move forward in peace and prosperity. Because as you know, peace is a precondition to everything else. We can't talk about economic development if there's no peace. We cannot talk about a better education system or a better health system. So peace is a prerequisite, and President Trump has been really doing everything in his power so far to make sure that peace is preserved in the entire region of the Western Balkans. And of course, that starts by deterring Serbia. Not by appeasing Serbia, by deterring Serbia. Because as we've learned from history, appeasement of autocrats has never led to long-lasting peace.
Very well. And President Osmani, I just want to clarify this for our audience. So your understanding, just from these recent remarks by President Trump, and I want to emphasize here, as President Osmani correctly said, President Trump has repeated this several times, beginning at the NATO summit, then in the Oval Office, and then reportedly in some other settings. So it's at least 3 or 4 times that he has stated this point. And I just want to clarify, your understanding is that he is not referring to some past potential attack. This is something recent. Is that your understanding?
Yes. He is very clear in his statement that he's talking about the last couple of weeks. He's not talking about the 2020 Washington Agreement, which was also President Trump's contribution. He's also not talking about the Bajanska attack, the act of aggression of 2023. But he was very clear in his statements. And, for those of us that read our security briefings every single day, and we're not allowed to say more, but it's obvious also from President Trump's statements that he has given an enormous contribution in stopping the destabilization of our region, also in very recent weeks. So I'm very certain that it has, of course, been stopped with America's role and his direct involvement in preserving and protecting peace.
That's quite significant. And because you know, many people think, oh, Balkans, they don't care about that. But in this case, we have proof from the president's own words. And as you're giving us this helpful background, let's stay with the United States for a moment. And two other.
I mean, just to add, that's
Yes,
our
that's
understanding,
your
given the
understanding.
circumstances
Sure.
and the information that we receive on a daily
Sure.
basis.
And that's very helpful. Then, just staying with the United States for a moment. So let me come economic and political. So there's economic and political. You know, of course, and you mentioned the Washington Agreement, which had very much of an economic focus to it. And that's a continuing element. Do you see some opportunities with the administration on that? Mm-hmm. And then politically, and take these in whatever order you like, do you anticipate that potentially, because again, President Trump cited this, he's definitely, we see him projecting pride in having been a peacemaker in Iran, Israel, India, Pakistan, on Congo, DRC, and this was the context in which he originally mentioned this. Do you see some potential, and would you welcome that, for the United States to actually get involved on, and here we're, of course, there's the long-standing EU dialogue in which the EU has a lead, but do you see potentially a role, political role for the United States? Please.
I'll start with the political. So I believe that President Trump is already showing that he's keeping a very close eye on the Western Balkans, and particularly on the relations between Kosovo and Serbia, because that was one of his success stories in Trump 1. But secondly, I think he strongly believes, and he very much understands, that that is a region where Russia also has a very high interest, and so does China. And both of these adversaries, if I may use the strong word, but also there's a constant destabilization effort from Iran. So it's this triangle, China, Russia, and Iran, that has this strong interest in exercising its malign role in the Western Balkans. China does it through economics. We're the only country in that region that has not participated in the China Road and Belt Initiative. But Russia does it in every sense that there can be, from propaganda and disinformation to sending constant weapons to Serbia, to inciting Serbia to use violence, to using its political and economic influence on the leaders of Serbia and Republika Srpska in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and so on and so forth. So President Trump and his team are very much aware of the dangers. Because, you know, a destabilized Western Balkans means a destabilized Europe. So there are people who would love another war under Trump's watch. We need to make sure that it never happens. I mean, what we can control and what is in our hands as Kosovo, of course we will never let it happen, both in terms of preserving peace and deterrence, but also in defending our country, defending democracy, defending freedom, which today we enjoy also thanks to the contribution of the United States. But because the situation is fragile, because it's such an important part of the European continent that, you know, even in the past has had such an impact in the entire global security, not just in Europe, I think that the interest and the attention of President Trump's administration will increase. And that, hopefully would also mean a stronger role, a stronger presence, a stronger leadership in the Kosovo-Serbia dialogue. In the past, mostly this was left to the EU, and I think we need a stronger American role if we want success. If we want progress, we need America there. We need them at the table. We need them present. We need them leading the effort based on the values that it has always protected in Kosovo and in the wider region. Now, getting back to economy, because these are all interconnected. when you're safe, when you're prosperous, when you're at peace, there's bigger chances also for more economic relations. So I'm really hoping that based on some of the ideas that we've presented yesterday and some of the ideas that we will present in meetings today and also in other opportunities, that these will be taken into consideration by the Trump administration, and we can start with our teams negotiating a more strategic economic relationship between our two countries. And my final point is the defense relationship. That has been going quite well, but there's an enormous potential to increase that and again bring it to a higher level, because Kosovo already spends 2% of its GDP in defense. We're planning to double that in the next few years, not by 2035, much earlier than that. And because it's also in our interest, in the interest of peace in the region. And in the history of our nation, we have never attacked anyone. We have never invaded anyone. It's about defending ourselves. It's about defending our country and our freedom, which have all been hard won with so much sacrifice for centuries. So I believe that the potential is really high, especially in a few areas, starting with energy, information technology, and AI. Kosovo is quite a hub in the region with the highest tech competitiveness in the entire Western Balkans 2 years in a row. And that's among others because we have the youngest population in Europe by age, but also very tech savvy, multilingual, brilliant youth that have been doing wonders. 75% of what they produce is already exported to the United States. If I can use the word export for all of these IT things that they do. I'm not the expert, so correct me if I'm wrong, but in fact, they have their main partner is already the United States. So I see so much potential in this area, and there are a few other areas that we've been presenting in these meetings, and hopefully they will be taken into account. Look, it is very important that some of the economic areas that are right now kind of a monopoly of China, that we bring them, that we make sure that we support the United States in its effort to have whether processing centers or producing centers in European countries and in the United States. I think that is strategically so important. And it's not just politics, it's also about our security. It's about fighting these malign forces that have been trying to destroy our democracies and the values-based systems that NATO and the European Union, where we want to join, are. So it's so important that we work closely with the United States in this endeavor, in this priority. So I would say nothing better than producing in the most pro-American nation on earth. So looking at Kosovo as that country that has this very strategic position geographically that actually connects the East with the West, and also looking at it as a place that is, I would say, an extension of American values, an extension of America's best, one of the best success stories in American history. So looking at Kosovo as that country where, more can be produced, more American can be produced, also in the sense of competitiveness with America's adversaries.
I take that, and I want to go back to your point, President Osmani, about defense and the defense relationship here. And of course, and then we will then turn, you mentioned Serbia. I'm going to ask you about your perspectives on Serbia, then relations with inside Kosovo, this political turmoil, deadlock, and also relations with Kosovo Serbs. So coming back to the defense relationship, for Kosovo, obviously, NATO is the, if we can use a Latin phrase, being lawyers, the ne plus ultra for Kosovo. Do you see potential here? Because the U.S.-NATO relationship, we did see a successful summit. We did see a reaffirmation from President Trump of Article 5 and commitment. Do you see a pathway for Kosovo, at least for Partnership for Peace and President Osmani? Let me connect this for you, because traditionally that's been linked, of course, with the dialogue and the Association of Serb Majority Municipalities, and implementation, and of course you have 4 NATO non-recognizers. And so do you see, number one, do you see a pathway with this administration to advance Kosovo towards NATO? And 2, what about this perceived linkage? And that applies also to Council of Europe as well as NATO.
Let me start with NATO. It is a huge mistake to connect the Kosovo-Serbia relations, a bilateral relation, with Kosovo's individual path towards NATO. Serbia doesn't want to join NATO. They've made that decision. It's their own right to decide about their own country. We want to join NATO. It would have been different if we both want to join NATO, and then if the progress in the dialogue for both of us is then linked to joining NATO. But Serbia doesn't want NATO. They hate NATO. They don't believe in the values that NATO represents and the priorities that NATO have. And for that reason, linking our relations with Serbia to our NATO membership, it's a huge mistake. Secondly, Kosovo's NATO membership is not as complex as Ukraine's NATO membership. It is a very simple, well, not very simple, to correct myself, simpler than Ukraine. Again, it is simpler than Ukraine in the sense that all it takes is for the United States to say this should happen. Because it's the biggest and the strongest NATO ally, they've always led the way. And now we have a NATO Secretary General that is so in sync with the President of the United States. And if this duo wants to make it happen, they can convince the 4 non-recognizers, which is Greece. Already Greece has never blocked our path towards the European Union. Despite of this lack of letter of recognition, they've been quite constructive in relations with Kosovo. So it will take a little bit of an effort with Spain and the other 2, Romania and Slovakia. But it is absolutely possible. And look, Partnership for Peace, which would be just a step towards membership, is so much easier because it doesn't require ratification in the member states' parliaments. It just requires a letter of invitation by the NATO member states within the North Atlantic Council, NAC, sent to Kosovo. And this should be done for strategic purposes. But also, if we look at this from an economic point of view, you would have another member that contributes, another member that would immediately jump to 5%. By the time we would be in NATO, we would already be in 5%. And that's I think, in the interest of all the member states. Secondly, a country that has an army that has been entirely trained by NATO, an army that has weapons that are entirely in line with NATO standards, an army that has been doing an excellent job, especially in some niche capabilities like search and rescue. We have one of the best in Europe. As well as in demining, where we are training the Ukrainian forces. So niche capabilities, I think, are quite necessary within NATO right now. And most importantly, an army of soldiers that believes in the power of NATO. They were kids when NATO saved their lives. It's our chance to give back. We want to give back. We're already serving shoulder to shoulder with U.S. soldiers in peacekeeping missions around the world. Look at the Kosovo soldiers at West Point and other military academies. I mean, they're doing wonders. Most of the time, they're best in their class, whether in the UK or in other NATO member states. They're really good. So it's not about being a burden. It's about being a contributor. So even from an economic point of view, I think the return would be much higher than the effort that would be put into getting us into NATO. I think, this administration, my impression is, they are doers. It's about action. It's about getting things done. I think they can get it done, especially at this point in time. I think they can get it done. It's peanuts compared to convincing member states to spend 5% by 2035. It's a very easy thing. So it takes will. It takes will, and when there's a will, there's always a way that can be found to get Kosovo into NATO. And the more NATO territory in the Western Balkans, the less the possibility for conflicts, for destabilization. So if we would have Kosovo, and of course Bosnia-Herzegovina, who also wants to join NATO, then that would be more than 80% of the countries of our region. We already have Croatia, we already have Albania, we already have Slovenia, we already have North Macedonia. They are in NATO, and their membership has brought more stability, has brought more security, peace, and prosperity to our region. So for that reason, I think it is possible. The Council of Europe, the same. It was a huge mistake to connect that country, that organization that is not part of the EU, with the EU-led dialogue. Now, the EU-led dialogue is a little different because since 2010, when the UN General Assembly resolution was adopted to start the dialogue, it was linked to EU membership because both countries want to join the EU, and both countries' prospect to joining the EU is linked to the EU-led dialogue from day one. But Council of Europe and NATO is a huge mistake to connect these two because it gives another country who doesn't want to even join NATO the veto power over the membership of a country who wants to join, who already contributes to global security. So strategically, it's, I think, in the interest of the alliance to have as many like-minded countries like Kosovo within the alliance in the sense of us contributing rather than being a burden. So from being importers of stability and security, we can also become exporters of stability and security.
You make a very strong case. I'm going to come to that in a second. Allow me just 2 quick points. Very interesting, you referenced that 2010 resolution in the UN General Assembly that is the one that created this whole approach towards the EU, that gave the EU this role to lead this dialogue. That, what is sometimes overlooked, is that was in response to the prior resolution that was led by the former Serbian Foreign Minister, Vuk Jeremic, to challenge the Declaration of Independence of Kosovo at the International Court of Justice. And it was that same year in 2010 that the International Court of Justice ruled that Kosovo's Declaration of Independence does not violate international law or Resolution 1244. So all of these were connected to that original challenge to Kosovo's independence. Second, you mentioned the role of NATO. Just allow me quickly to mention our own project here with NATO at SAIS, where we've brought youth leaders from the WB6, including from Kosovo, together with their counterparts, including from Serbia, to make recommendations. And one of them is exactly on search and rescue and taking advantage of, as you mentioned, Kosovo's outstanding capabilities, which could be something that could be regional and developed because that's a humanitarian action.
Exactly.
You're saving people's lives. Who cares what their ethnic nationality is?
Exactly.
But let me now pivot there. Okay, very interesting. This pathway to NATO that you described, and Kosovo as a contributor, not just accepting. Let me just ask you, because this is a good segue for relations in the country with the Serb citizens of the Republic of Kosovo. KFOR is there, and as you would move to NATO, that would, and the alliance would like that. There would be no more need for KFOR. But at the same time, ironically, KFOR is very popular with Serbs and with Albanians, Kosovo Albanians and Kosovo Serbs. And it's even popular in Belgrade, even though they're saying, well, oh, you should strengthen KFOR at times. So I want to ask you, President Osmani, because it's very important. The relations under the current government, this is now caretaker, but the previous government, with the Kosovo Serbs have been fraught with tension, and we know that. And you talk about coordination. The government has been accused several times of not coordinating, taking unilateral, uncoordinated steps. The relations are not good with the Kosovo Serb citizens, particularly in the north. What can you say about that? What can you say about Kosovo's role and embrace of all of its citizens, including its Kosovo Serb citizens?
In Kosovo, when we drafted our very first constitution ever, we could have chosen the path of saying, look, 92% in Kosovo are of an Albanian nationality. Who cares about the 8%? But that's not the path that we chose. We know what it feels to be discriminated. We know what it feels to be striped off your rights. So we wanted to do the exact opposite. We wanted to no one to ever feel what we had to go through. Which is why we drafted the most advanced constitution on minority community rights that exists on European soil. Now, you're a lawyer, and I'm sure that we have a couple of more here. Can you mention one other country in Europe where a minority of 3 to 4% of the population can block any law, any piece of legislation of vital interest, any constitutional amendment, and any other decision of great importance in the parliament, even if we have 120 members of parliament, even if 110 vote in favor, we cannot pass it because the 10 seats that belong to the Serb community that are guaranteed to them have the veto power over any piece of legislation of vital interest, over any constitutional change, even if it's just a comma, technical change, and over many other important decisions. And this model of a veto power for that minority community has been replicated also at the local level, local assemblies, in other institutions where they have guaranteed seats like the justice system, the police system, and so on and so forth. So representation is the first step towards them feeling not just embraced, but also empowered, included, and the fact that they have a voice can resolve problems. Obviously, it was never easy because we're talking about Kosovo, a country that had to endure genocide in the hands of the Milosevic regime. So, and that was just about 25, 26 years ago. So for us, these memories, like for all families who live in Kosovo, are very, very fresh. Nevertheless, we wanted to make sure that Kosovo thrives as a multi-ethnic society. So we see this multiculturalism, the multi-religious society, as something that enriches Kosovo rather than the opposite. I come from Mitrovica, a city that is quite multi-ethnic, and oftentimes, when we, the Kosovo institutions, would propose ideas that would integrate different communities, we were told by many bureaucrats in the international community, no, you should be divided. So segregation never leads to integration. Separation never leads to integration. Not letting Albanians and Serbs cross a bridge so that they can talk to one another, so that they can buy each other's products, so that they can visit doctors in the other side of the bridge. Bridges are supposed to connect, not divide. For God's sakes, you're the nation that said, Mr. Gorbachev, bring down that wall. That's the kind of leadership that we expect from the United States of America. Not to say, don't cross that bridge. Makes no sense. It's against every value that the United States represents. Now, creating the impression that ordinary people crossing a bridge, an old Albanian woman crossing a bridge and going to buy cheese in the north, that endangers the Serbian community in the north? It does not. The wrong perception has been created that bridges endanger. Bridges connect. They don't endanger. Now, as you rightly pointed out, I'm a big proponent, supporter of full coordination with the United States and other allies, in the sense that coordination with our allies on security issues has always brought success to Kosovo. History shows. I've been working in Kosovo's public institutions for the past 26 years. I started really young. Every single time we worked together, it ended up successfully. Every single time we didn't, it ended up a disaster. Nevertheless, when I invite our allies and partners to sit down and discuss a strategy on how we can open that bridge that connects the north with the south, that connects different communities, how we can build a strategy that would take into consideration the interest of all citizens. If they have a concern, let's listen to them and let's remove that concern. Let's do better public communication. Let's take all of the security concerns, if any, into consideration. We need to sit down. We cannot just ignore this and postpone it for another 26 years. I just took the example of the bridge in the sense that there's so much miscommunication and a fear for entirely inexistent reasons is created among the Serb population in the north. I mean, they live in Kosovo. We live in Kosovo. We're not going anywhere. The idea should be about how to bring people together. How can youth have concerts together? How they can have basketball matches together. Not about how to divide them in a bridge. It's a communist idea. It belongs to the past. It's a horrible idea. So with the Trump administration, I hope we can work together to fight these kind of horrible ideas. If all we have to do is sit down and talk to everyone instead of instilling fear, we have to instill hope. The young generation deserves to live, to work, to prosper together, to have economic empowerment together, and not to think that if they cross a bridge, something horrible will happen, because nothing horrible will happen by crossing a bridge. Nothing horrible will happen. Beautiful things will happen. So it's about time that lots of the bureaucrats from the European Union and some other countries that deal with Kosovo start talking in a positive sense about bringing people together. Start perhaps proposing economic projects where Albanians and Serbs and Turks and others could work together instead of just saying, don't do anything. Some sort of status quo that is constantly instilling fear instead of instilling hope for a future where a multi-ethnic society thrives economically and in peace. So I believe that for all the wrong reasons, there is a huge misconception that has been created, to some extent also because, some people just, keep talking about crossing a bridge as if it was the end of the world, as if it was a tragedy, as if it was a war. Why would crossing a bridge cause a war, for God's sakes? Why would a family that wants to send their kid to a doctor at 4 a.m. because of fever should be confined only to the one doctor that lives in the north instead of being able to send the kid anywhere they want? So to me, these are very simple principles. So complicating it, making it as if it's the end of the world, if people talk to one another, if people cross bridges, if people, including the Serbs, respect the institutions of the sovereign Republic of Kosovo. These are normal things. Imagine China opening a school here in Washington, D.C., teaching with a Chinese curriculum. Would that be okay? Or Russia, even worse, with the Russian curriculum. That's not okay. I mean, we're not touching the schools and the hospitals and so on and so forth, but we need to separate between the risks that we had from these criminal gangs led by Radojcic and friends, who are also in the blacklist of the United States, and ordinary citizens. So I think communication needs to be better from all sides, including from the government of Kosovo. But we need to sit down and build a strategy together with our allies and partners. Instead of just postponing this for another 26 years and never being the right moment, it's about time we sit together and coordinate. But coordination is a two-way street, Professor Joseph, right?
Yes.
So
Yes.
that's what we're asking.
And I take the point and your emphasis about the bridge, and the bridge both as a metaphor and a real physical connecting point. I think people do understand that. The problem and has been, and you know this because you've been such a proponent of coordination, is that the government, if a caretaker / previous government approach has been to not coordinate on these steps, many of which have been backed, for example, by the United States and the previous U.S. ambassador, who said that in principle these steps are correct, but it has been done without the coordination, without the type of dialogue that you support, and therefore created this impression that these steps are against us. These are against us, Kosovos, that these are oppressive. And then there are concerns, and as a lawyer, of course, and a doctor of laws, you know about expropriations and some arrests, and about whether in these cases, whether they follow the rule of law. So I take your point there very well, that it's time to sit down. Economic projects do indeed sound like a very viable point. And again, this administration, that's what they're all about in the end, is doing that and maybe reviving that approach. Let me turn, if I could, President Osmani, to your neighbor, Serbia, and invite you to comment, as you might like, on the extraordinary developments there. These mass protest movement against, as you mentioned, an autocratic or semi-autocratic leader, which is extremely difficult to do. It's very hard when a leader has so much power for citizens to mobilize, and yet Serbian citizens have done that, led by the students, since last November. Now, I invite you, any comment you want to make about this protest movement, and do you see, and again, I ask this of your neighbors as well, who are in Montenegro or in Bosnia-Herzegovina, do you see, by and large, that this protest movement leads to a better relationship with Serbia, or do you see maybe not, maybe just more of the same, please?
So, if I would like to ask for your understanding and not getting into details on this, and not really explaining exactly what I think about that situation, because every single time we talk about those protests, Vučić comes out in a 3-hour lengthy press conference complaining how Kosovo is behind these protests. It's ridiculous, obviously. We're not behind any protest in Serbia. It's just the power of the people, and the power of students is really strong. It was them who brought down Milosevic, as you know, right after the war in Kosovo. But it is very evident that these protests are about human rights, about democracy, about fighting crime and corruption. But I wouldn't like to dwell on it more than that, because unfortunately, then every statement that we make is being abused by the Serbian leader to attack students, to attack human rights activists, telling them you're working with Kosovo, which is not true. They're doing this for their own country. They're doing this for their own people. It doesn't have any relation with developments in Kosovo, and I wouldn't like Vučić to abuse anything that we say about it. But just a general comment about the situation of human rights in Serbia and the rule of law in Serbia, and that's even before the protests began. If you look at the European Union statements and reports, you will see that the situation of human rights, rule of law, and freedom of speech and so on in Serbia has deteriorated massively within Vučić's mandate. So it's very much connected to his leadership, if it can be called leadership, to his kind of autocratic leadership of Serbia. He has, brought Serbia from a 96% alignment with EU, whether on sanctions or values, to a 40% alignment with the EU. He looks at, China, Russia, and Iran for partnerships, whether politically, militarily, or economically. And he's brought the country to a point where 83% of the people trust Putin and they believe that Ukraine started the war. And that's because of him, because a leader leads also in terms of opinion. And when he controls all of the media, obviously it's so much easier to sell propaganda. So in that sense, the situation of human rights and rule of law has been deteriorating, and especially when it comes to the Albanians who live in the Preševa Valley. In terms of numbers, they are higher than Serbs in Kosovo, but we never hear the international community loud and clear talking about how on a daily basis the basic human rights of the Albanians in Serbia is being violated grossly, and in a sense that violates all of the international obligations that Serbia has under international conventions, to the extent that the European Parliament calls it ethnic cleansing through administrative means. They just stripe people off of their citizenship. They don't let them vote. They don't let them live in their houses or have, property and so on and so forth. So these are the kind of things that hopefully we will hear everyone talk about more. And I hope you can host one day the leaders, the Albanian leaders of the Preševa Valley, so that they can tell you with very concrete examples. I mean, it's the very basic human rights. It's like how we lived in the 90s. Yes. So in that sense, it would be so important for us to join forces to give them also a voice.
Absolutely, and I met with them here, and it's a great suggestion to actually have a public event with leaders of the community in Albanian community in Preševa Valley. And what you say is absolutely true, and it's a reminder of the need across the region to be looking at the rights of those who are not in a majority position. And let me allow me to point out here that Kosovo has excellent relations with the rest of the WB6.
Yes.
You have recognition from them, and that Kosovo has taken the additional step with Bosnia and Herzegovina, if I'm correct, that you have lifted visa restrictions on citizens of Bosnia and Herzegovina, even though the same is not true.
For them. It's true. It's true. We did that unilaterally. We did it for the people. There's a lot of connections between us and Bosnia and Herzegovina. We both lived through genocide. There are a lot of mixed marriages, between Kosovar Albanians and Bosnians, and we have a historically excellent relation with the people of Bosnia and Herzegovina. But they have a very complex way of decision making. So they have 3 presidents, not just one. So all 3 have to agree on these kind of decisions in order to lift visas for certain countries. And the representatives of Republika Srpska, the Serb community there, they have been blocking that. They have been vetoing a decision through which Bosnia and Herzegovina would also lift visas for Kosovo. But we wanted to do that unilaterally just so that people can communicate, again, bringing people together. That is something that should be a very noble mission for each and every one of us as politicians.
Very well said, and especially as we approach the 30th anniversary of Srebrenica and Žepa coming.
Exactly. It's tomorrow, so you probably know it's the 30th anniversary.
Yes, exactly. Coming up just tomorrow. Memorable for me. I was in Žepa at that time, 30 years ago. And I would point out here and acknowledge as well that Kosovo has excellent relations, as you mentioned, with Greece and with Croatia. And I want to acknowledge the ambassador of Croatia, Pierre Šimunović, who is here, and as well as your other neighbors. With Bulgaria, you have also very good relations with. So let me turn and then in the time we have, we'll take some questions. But let's turn from your neighbors to your internal political situation and the role that you play, this very important role. There have been, I believe it's now 45 attempts, 44 or 45 attempts.
We stopped counting.
We stopped. Okay, you stopped counting. Of attempts to constitute the parliament. And in order to constitute the parliament under your constitution, you have to elect the president of the parliament. And President Osmani, you served actually in that role. And so no one is more qualified than you to address this topic. You were a very successful parliamentarian with attracting a record-setting number of votes and presided over the assembly. And now you're in the position as president. There's this ruling of the Constitutional Court. It imposes a 30-day deadline. So, two questions. What are you doing in your efforts here? What's your approach to getting over this deadlock? And second, if you don't meet, if that 30-day deadline is not met, then what?
That's the question that everyone has, the second one that you mentioned. So I've had a number of meetings with political leaders because leaders of political parties need to sit down together and they need to form a parliamentary majority in order to constitute the parliament and then the government. It's a basic rule of democracy. But so far, that has not happened, and the parliament was stuck since the 15th of April. According to our rules of procedure, they have to try every 48 hours, which is why the number of tryouts has been quite big. However, in terms of timing, we started trying, the political parties started trying on the 15th of April. Now we're already in July. So it's been a couple of months, and it's very frustrating for the people of Kosovo, both in the sense of politics and how, they expect leaders to sit down and agree and compromise and work through a consensus-based democracy. However, this has not happened, but mostly because of, and what I'm mostly concerned as president is, we're losing out a lot. Sometimes a window of opportunity opens, and because you don't have a parliament, you lose it out. We're losing out a lot in terms of relations with our friends and partners, not just in terms of the image, but there are a number of international agreements through which we can get so much financial support, and other countries in the region have been using them for quite some time, but because we don't have a parliament, we're not able to ratify that agreement. So, and it's very risky, for a country that is based on a separation of powers principle, that has a parliament, a president, a prime minister, and they all kind of, the parliament always oversees the government. For me, this is an erosion of democracy, not to have a parliament in place, and many other things that are damaging our country's interests and our people's interests. So I continuously urge the leaders to get those numbers done as soon as possible. But of course, they have their own issues in mind, and now the Constitutional Court in a decision has imposed a 30-day deadline, which expires on the 26th of July. So I forget what the date is today, because it's the 10th, so it's about a little over 2 weeks, which means that it's not that much, and we've been working with parties to make sure that this deadline is met. But in the meantime, the court has not answered what happens, what are the legal consequences if the parliament is not constituted within this deadline. It simply says in its ruling that it's a constitutionally it's a constitutional norm, a constitutionally mandatory norm to constitute the parliament within 30 days. But then if a mandatory norm is not respected, it does not explain anything. What is the consequence of it? So we're looking at the legal possibilities of addressing the court again to ask for clarifications only on this. What are the legal consequences of not constituting the parliament? And hopefully then the court will quickly answer, just to know what would happen. But so right now where we are is political parties are trying to find a common language, which they haven't so far, at least not until right now. Unless something happened while we were talking. So, but I would have known because my team would have made a sign of some sort. But nothing has happened, right? No, nothing has happened so far.
We'll keep monitoring that. I'll take hands now for questions, and I'm going to slip one in for you. That do you believe that you, as president, have the authority to call for new elections? Do you believe you have that authority?
According to the Constitution, a number of legal criteria need to be met, which are not met at this time. So the parliament would first have to be constituted in order to be dissolved, and only then I could call for elections. The second instance would be if they try to form a government and they fail within 60 days, then I can call elections. The third instance would be if the Constitutional Court orders me to call new elections, which they did back in December 2020 when they found that Abdullah Houti's government was unconstitutional, and they ordered the president to immediately call for elections. But so far, that circumstance is not met.
None of those three?
No.
Okay. So I will look for hands here, and we don't have a mic runner here. Let me start right over here, please. And kindly say your name and then.
I'm Dr. Marilyn Sifonka from Howard University. I just wanted to find out from you, as President of Kosovo, what is the image of the United States in Kosovo? Because it seems to be that it's either very much idealized or not. I mean, the U.S. has had a rather short history, but it has had a very painful history, especially for minorities, quote-unquote minorities. So we also have what we call the electoral college. So is the United States viewed as this perfect democracy, or is it seen in all its flaws and all its good?
Thank you for that. We'll take Ambassador Shimunich. Did you have a comment while I'm over in this part of the room?
Many thanks. Thanks for convening us, Madam President. It was a privilege, and thank you for being with us. As you know, speaking on behalf of Croatia, our friendship, Kosovo-Croatia, between the states and the peoples goes back very deep into history, and we have a joint effort to achieve our freedom and independence. And there is also a great group of Kosovo Albanians, Croatian, living in Croatia, who will be fighting for the independence and freedom of both countries. So my question, we are very much dedicated to the stability and democracy and independence of Kosovo, and also specifically at this stage for supporting all efforts to get Kosovo as soon as possible into NATO and into the European Union. We see that in your interest, we see that in our interest, in the interest of the European security and the security of Southeast Europe, and also we have been continuously providing a significant contribution to the deployment of our forces to KFOR. My question is, and you mentioned it briefly, so if you would be kind enough to expand it a bit. There is still a group of countries not recognizing Kosovo. This is very relevant for the EU and NATO accession, but also your functioning and the position within the UN. Will you be able to tell us more about your discussion with these countries, the arguments they are using, the arguments you are using, and the state of play in terms of would there be soon any movements in that direction? So I thank you for being with us.
Thank you. Look, I believe that there's no such thing as a perfect democracy in the world. Democracy is never a finished or finite project. You can always do more. You always have to strive for more. You can just say full stop, we've achieved everything. Because, technology is advancing. The world is moving fast. We always need to do things better. Each society needs to strive for better. And I think also politicians in the United States understand that, which is why they constantly come up with new ideas on how to improve the economy, how to improve the society, how to improve prosperity and the opportunities that are given to the citizens. But what we see in the United States is the perfect ally to Kosovo. So perhaps I'm making it clear. The United States is one of the main reasons why today our kids can go to bed without the sounds of firearms and tanks, and why parents can feel at ease that their kids would not be killed. Our parents did not have that luck. Neither did any generation before them. We are all children of war. We grew up in war. So did our parents. So did our grandparents. So did every generation before them. For us, what America did was a miracle. It's a miracle to have the first generation of kids ever to have not known war and to only live in peace. And only those of us that have lived through war understand the power of such partnerships, of such alliances, because we've known the lack of freedom. We've known and lived the opposite of democracy. We never want to go back there. And keeping our relationship with the United States strong is an important element of that foundation. So 97% of the people of Kosovo are pro-American. The 2 to 3%, as you might imagine, are among the Serbian community, mostly living in the north because of too much Russian propaganda and Vučić propaganda over there. But 97% believe in America. It's not about idealizing it. It's about trusting a leadership that saved our lives. Very literally, trusting a leadership that saved our lives. It's not about making things in the sense of idealizing it. For us, it was the reality that we lived, which is why this relationship is so special. It has been so consequential in our history, and that is why I strive so much to continuously strengthen it and nourish it. When it comes to, Ambassador, thank you for joining us. When it comes to the non-recognizers, so we don't really hear arguments from them, perhaps because they have none, to not recognize Kosovo. You know, no country has lost anything from recognizing Kosovo, quite the opposite. They want a friend, a partner, and an ally of shared values. They, you know, the non-recognizers within Europe have some domestic considerations in mind, but none of them are really relevant any longer since the ICJ opinion in 2010, which has clarified that general international law has not been violated through our independence, that Resolution 1244 of the UN Security Council has not violated, and it has shown how similar the way Kosovo got its independence was with the way the United States got its independence. The United States, when the representatives of the people got together, they didn't ask for the permission of the monarch to declare independence. They didn't ask the British monarchy whether they should become independent. Neither did we. As you know very well, we were an invaded territory for more than a century. We simply regained our freedom from invaders. And there are many countries around the world that had similar histories, whether we're talking about the Baltics and so on and so forth. We freed ourselves from those who occupied our territory. And I think this is very important in our discussions, both, you know, the ICJ opinion, but also the history of how we got there. And, you know, it beats me, why would these countries, you know, compare themselves to Milosevic? Because they did not commit genocide against their own people. They did not. You know, in the ICJ opinion, there's this, for those of you who are lawyers, I would really encourage you to read. It's a separate opinion of Judge Trinidade of Brazil. So Judge Trinidade of Brazil agreed with the majority opinion that Kosovo's declaration of independence was not a violation of international law, but he gave additional arguments and an additional point of view. And what he does is, he also has some excellent book about what he calls the humanistic approach of international law. But he says a country cannot invoke the argument of territorial integrity and sovereignty to kill the citizens who live in that territory. And that's what Milosevic did. He said the moment you do that, the moment you abuse with that argument to kill, to commit massacres, to commit war crimes, crimes against humanity and genocide, that's when you lose the right to invoke territorial integrity and sovereignty. And these countries, the non-recognizers, they never did that. Why should they align themselves with such a logic? With a logic, a mindset that in the 90s committed all of these horrendous crimes against Croats, against Bosnians, against Kosovars, and tried also in other countries in our region, and waged so many wars that ended with more than 150,000 civilians killed. That's a mindset that we should all fight rather than align with it. So that's why I think that with the passing of time, well, some countries are very close. I mentioned Greece. We have excellent economic and political relations with Greece. They're very close, but a few others, they're a little farther away, maybe because there's lack of communication to the as much as we have it with Greece, but we are trying our best. Kosovo is a reality that will never go away, a reality that is irreversible. I mean, Kosovo, sovereign, free, and independent, is there to stay. We're not going anywhere, ever. It's a forever project. It's not temporary, it's a forever project. Too many have sacrificed their lives for our independence. We're not going anywhere. The quicker many accept this reality, the better for stability in the entire region, and the better, as you know, to stop these horrible dreams that Vučić has of getting Bosnia back, of getting Montenegro back, of getting Kosovo back. He's not getting any of that, because we were there well before Serbs came. Because for hundreds of years we were under occupation. We never lost our identity. Never, ever. We will continue to defend it, no matter the price.
Thank you. Well, oh my gosh, we got a bunch of questions and not too much time. So Anton, you're right there. This gentleman and then Milan Nesic right next to him. We'll get three, and then Anya right there. We'll group these four. Please.
Yeah, Mir Servet, welcome to the United States. Samet Shabani, consultant and research on countering violent extremism and religious populism. Mr. Osmani, thank you very much for your insightful remarks. I have kind of two questions. You boldly mentioned that there were destabilization attempts by Russia, China, and Iran, and you well articulated means of destabilization by Russia and China. But I was rather interested what kind of means you had reported or notified or kind of observed on destabilization attempts by Iran. That is one of the questions. And the second, you boldly also expressed your political will to pass the bridge, if I may. So what would be your three actions if you kind of propose an action plan to convince partners for passing the bridge? What would
I'm
be
not going to
three
make that
concrete
public.
actions that would convince, and you would say like, here is
Good.
what we can do to pass the bridge?
All right, well said. Milan Nesic.
It's a very good question, but I hope you understand that at this point in time, I cannot talk about the action plan. I hope you understand.
Milan.
Thank you
Please.
so much for doing this. My name is Milan Nesic. I'm still a VOA journalist. I heard something concerning... VOA, yep. My Albanian colleagues are not here. I'm from the Serbian service. So I heard something concerning regarding the a kind of confirmation that you provided regarding the possible prevention of the attack of Serbia to Kosovo, which was mentioned by President Trump. Sorry for insisting, but can you elaborate in more details, and are you familiar with KFOR or NATO position towards this, if any, since they are in the region more than present? And the other thing is, did the United States, during your visit, show any interest in offering incentives to help restart the dialogue between Kosovo and Serbia? In which framework? And I'm referring here to the Washington Agreement, which was made in September 2020. Thank you so much, Ed. Thank you for
Of course, Milan. Thanks for being here. Please.
Taykan Erdemir, Anti-Defamation League. Your
Merhabalar.
Excellency, merhaba, felementerit. The first time we met in 2014, I was a lawmaker visiting you in your capacity as the, the chair of the European Integration Committee, and I was part of the Turkey-Kosovo caucus as a lawmaker. And it's great to see you thrive politically, and it's great to see Kosovo thrive politically. And on behalf of ADL, I would like to thank Kosovo for being the second Muslim majority country in the world after Albania to adopt the IRA definition of anti-Semitism. And also thank you for making Holocaust education mandatory in the schooling system. I have one question concerning anti-Semitic incitement and disinformation on social media, which is now a major problem across Europe. Do you see any of that in Kosovo? And do you also see any disinformation campaigns, not only to stoke anti-Semitic sentiments, but also to peddle Holocaust distortion and denial, especially by some of the malign state and non-state actors you alluded to? Thank you.
Very well. And Antoine, could you give to this gentleman right here? He's anyone wearing a Ukraine shirt gets a question. That's a rule. That's a new rule, my rule.
Bill Huang, Science Nanjing alumni, grew up in China. So in 1999, the Chinese propaganda machine went all in to support Milosevic. And then when Chinese embassy was bombed in Belgrade, it became a huge embarrassment for the propaganda because people suddenly realized we cannot do anything about it. And then we were forced to write all things about Kosovo in our high school entrance exams. So I have a question for you. So how long or what does it take for, do you think, for Serbia, for the Serbian people to just let Kosovo go? How long will that happen, and will that ever happen? Even if Serbia would become more democratic in the future, will maybe the parties in Serbia still use the Kosovo issue to manipulate public opinion? So what's your opinion on this? Thank you.
Another interesting question. Thank you. And last, Antoine, if you can get back to Anya in the back. She's, you have a connection. This is our excellent student, Anya Dignon, and helping on this event. Thank you, Anya.
Thank you.
Altini Tsuimular.
President Osmani. In your view, how has Kosovo's post-war experience shaped the way families are formed and functioning today? In the 80s, families in Kosovo averaged over 4 children, reflecting a strong cultural emphasis on family life. Today, the number has declined, a shift that raises important questions. How might Kosovo's experience compare to other parts of the Balkans, also such as Bosnia, where the legacy of war displacement and trauma has also deeply disrupted the social and community fabric? What role do you believe regional dialogue and shared understanding could play in supporting long-term social healing and demographic renewal in the Balkans? Thank you so much.
And I'm going to try to see if I can recap it. We have a question on Iran. We have a question on the Trump remarks on Serbia, and also whether NATO or KFOR got involved from Milan. We have a question on anti-Semitism. We have a question about your view whether Serbia will ever get over it, if I can use that terminology. And we have a question from Anya about family structure. So I know there are more, but
Sure.
we have limited time.
I'll try to do my best, and I'm sorry because we have to go for other meetings. Otherwise, I would have loved to stay. It's the favorite part of every visit to come and talk to come at universities and have these kind of talks. But on Iran, it's mostly through their relationship with Serbia. They have quite a big and strong relationship. You know, the Serbian leader is the only European leader that has publicly accused the United States of violating international law when attacking Iran. And that was a testament to this strong relationship with Iran. Serbian ministers go to Iran all the time to negotiate Irani Shahid drones. You've probably seen there are public reports about thousands of them and so on. I'm not sure then what happened, but there are a lot of reports about that. And thirdly, Iran has constantly supported Serbia, not just in our region, but also beyond. It's the development of that kind of ideology. Now, beyond that, Iran has attacked Albania a couple of times in terms of cyber attacks. As you know, these have been horrendous cyber attacks, and there have been attempts based on the information that we have also for other cyber attacks in other countries in the region. So there's this risk from cyber attacks, and there's the risk that comes through their relationship with Serbia, which is mostly political and military, Not sure about economic right now, but of course they tend to push forward a certain ideology, which is very, very dangerous for the region. On the action plan, we're working on it, we're discussing it with our partners. When the moment comes, we will make it public. I ask for your understanding once again. When it comes to more information, as I said, it is our understanding, based on the security briefings that I get every single day, that President Trump has prevented a possible flare-up, if I may call it so, recently. So we're not talking about 2023, we're not talking about 2020, we're talking about developments that are very, very recent. So KFOR is there, of course. KFOR is there mostly to prevent and deter, and they have been doing an excellent job in prevention and deterrence and maintaining safety and security. But, you know, let's all remember what happened in September 2023. September 2023, we had an act of aggression by Serbia that was all prepared within Serbia, with those gangs being trained within Serbia. The weapons were under the chain of custody of Serbia. All the trainings happened in the military barracks of Serbia, and all of those who committed the attack are now being protected politically within Serbia, despite of the fact that they admitted to have committed that act of aggression. So we should not deny the possibility, because it has happened before. It has happened before, and then we had the attack on our critical infrastructure, which is still being investigated, but it was a very dangerous attack. So because it has happened before, prevention and deterrence are key. And sometimes prevention and deterrence take more than just the presence of military. It takes political leadership as well. It takes a phone call, a warning. And that's exactly what happens when America takes a leadership role. So I don't want to get involved, make statements on behalf of NATO, but I have very credible information, and I would have never said this if there was no credible information, that the risk was there. And it was also a clear statement by the United States president that he was talking about something recently, and the role of the United States in preserving peace in the Western Balkans, which is also a recent effort. It's not just an effort that belongs to the past, it's an effort of these days, which is continuing. And we work very closely with all the layers of US government, whether it's security and intelligence, whether it's defense, whether it's politics, in order to make sure that we jointly protect and preserve peace, and we do not let the minds who want destabilization to win. So
you have a clear confirmation from NATO regarding the possible.
I'm not going to answer that question. We have our own institutions that are doing an excellent job in collecting information, and we work with individual partners in order to confirm the information that our institutions gather. So it's never alone, but when it comes to NATO and to KFOR, I'm not going to make any statement. I know what I'm talking about. So yes, and by the way, even as we speak, there are risks from Serbia. They will constantly want to destabilize. When Vučić talks about peace, he never walks the talk. Again, I'm not talking about 1999, I'm talking about 2023. 2023 is a testament that he is stuck in the mindset of the 90s. There's no stronger testament than the act of aggression that happened in Bajska and the attack that they were planning. It was a clear annexation plan. It was a copycat of Putin's annexation plan. Every single evidence that we have collected leads to that. We thwarted the annexation plan by Serbia. They wanted to annex the north of Kosovo for many reasons, historic but also economic. He wanted to annex the north of Kosovo. We stopped it because they wanted to create a new situation in the ground, and then to have people saying, oh, let's now have the dialogue based on the new situation in the ground. We thwarted it successfully because of the professionalism of our forces and the support of our allies. But that is a test. I know, yes. But we're in 2025. It's not 26 years after.
I just was clarifying for Milan that she's not referring to this recent. You're referring.
No,
to
I'm talking about 2023 when I'm talking about the elements
Yes.
of the attack. Just to clarify that there's a constant risk, which we are constantly, successfully thwarting by preserving peace and making sure that these do not happen. Look, such a risk is also posed, let's say, to the Baltics. They have a crazy neighbor too. They're in constant risk, but these are countries that thrive. And so is Kosovo. It's a country that is thriving despite of these risks.
Can you please briefly regarding the incentives, so U.S. incentives towards the dialogue?
We didn't discuss the dialogue. It's very interesting. It was not raised for the very first time in so many years. We talked about, the great potential that exists out there to enhance relations between Kosovo and the United States. We talked about Kosovo and the United States. For once, we didn't talk about Serbia. Perfect. It was the perfect conversation.
Did you want to continue, President, with
yes, I'm sorry. I was trying to get, okay.
Anti-Semitism?
Anti-Semitism. So we
up?
did not notice in Kosovo anti-Semitic remarks or remarks that would deny Holocaust. No, not so far. There are people who disagree with what is happening in the Middle East. They disagree with the position that we as U.S. institutions have taken so far. But it's freedom of speech in Kosovo. So, but so far we have not seen these at levels that would pose a risk. And especially not Holocaust deniers. We have not noticed something like that so far. What does it take for the Serbian people to let Kosovo go? That's a very, very good question. In fact, about 50% of them, according to polls, already believe that Kosovo is gone. Well, legally speaking, it was never theirs. It was occupied. But let's leave that to history. They believe that the region should move on. It's about half of the population. It takes a leader in Serbia who will want to move on towards the future, a joint Euro-Atlantic future where we all live in peace. The day Serbia has that leader, I believe that that leader will have an impact also on the position of the people. Without propaganda, just the bare truth out there will help people heal. Truth can be liberating and healing. But Vučić is not letting his people know the truth because of propaganda, because the way he has captured the media in his country. So I think that day might come soon. Hopefully it will come sooner rather than later. It's at the benefit of Serbia itself, its people, but also the entire region. And the last question, if I'm not missing any other, has the war shaped the way families are created today? I would say to a certain extent, perhaps yes. For those of us that grew up in war, there's this constant worry. Raising children in a region that is still struggling is a constant worry. So you always want to know that peace will sustain. And when the war in Ukraine began, it was a message to everyone, but especially to those of us. It was a relived memory of war, but at the same time, it was a reminder that freedom is never given and it should not be taken for granted, that it's always under constant risk. And I can't say that doesn't shape the way how families think, how parents think. But this demographic problem is not only a problem for countries that went through war. It's a problem everywhere. In fact, it's a bigger problem in other countries in the region that have not gone through a war than in Kosovo. Kosovo still has, that map that Elon Musk published of Europe? Remember that one? There was only one green spot. That was Kosovo. We're still okay in terms of the birth rate. We're still okay. But it's not like it's becoming better with the passing of years. It's dropping, so we need to constantly, take measures in terms of social dialogue. And of course, I believe that regional cooperation always helps that. But social dialogue and just making sure that we support families. There are a lot of measures by the Kosovo government in support of families, in support of young moms, in support of children. And this, I think, is a very important measure that can help us in just, maintaining the birth rate that we have right now and not getting into the demographics problem that everyone in Europe is facing. As I said, look at that map. It's very interesting. It's all red except for one green spot, a little green spot, but an important green spot. We're still strong and resilient. So yeah.
And that strength and resilience is very much in evidence today, President Osmani. I was telling your excellent team here, Learta and Masoud Dugoli, that in promoting and reaching out to people in this event, I emphasized President Vjosa Osmani is a dynamic, vibrant leader, and you more than proved that. And I hope everyone here will join me in recognition that it is a privilege to come and listen to a leader of a state come and speak this openly and candidly with us. So please join me in thanking President Osmani.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you. Did you get? Okay, here.
You want another handshake?
Yes.
As
we have
many
to-
as you
yeah.
want.
Thanks. Look.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks
That's
a lot.
great. Thank you. That was outstanding.
Thank you so much.
Outstanding.